Hi everybody, my guest today is Ian Danter. Ian is a broadcaster and musician, probably best known for his work at TalkSport. He's also an accomplished drummer and has been playing from an early age. We had a good chat about how he got to where he is today. Hi Ian.
Hi Chris.
How's it going? I'm all right, how are you?
I'm absolutely average. No, I'm great, mate. It's good to see you.
Yeah,
face.
Yeah, we were just talking before, weren't we, about, I can't actually remember the last time I saw you, but I think possibly the last time I saw you, and we really need to talk about this, was a gig that we did, I don't know, maybe it could have been 10 years ago. You were on bass and vocals. I was on guitar. And how many drummers did we have?
598.
I think it was.
At the end. It was an Event City in Manchester. So this would be middle of 2012.
Oh, okay, right.
And yeah, we set a world record that day for 598 drummers playing the same beat at the same time. But before that, I put a bass on with you and Simon, who works for Marshall.
That's right.
Who drums, and we played some songs and got all the drummers to play along with us, doing like Seven Nation Army and what was it? Long Way to the Top, If You Want a Sausage Roll, things like that. Those sorts of songs, which was just, it was the most unholy racket, but it was a brilliant unholy racket, wasn't it?
It was the most bizarre thing. I think one of them. I've done a few bizarre gigs. That was definitely up there with them, because I've never felt so outnumbered in all my life, being the only guitarist with so like 600 odd drummers. And also because we were in this huge, it was like a hangar, wasn't it? It was unbelievably big. And
yeah.
hearing while we were playing, because there was a stage set up that we were on, and then on the floor essentially were all the drummers with all their kits and playing, and just hearing the echoes of 600 odd drummers playing in time. Honestly, it was actually something to behold.
It was something to behold, wasn't it? All the drummers, the funny thing was, all the drummers were told expressly before they came, just bring a four-piece kit, because the pattern you're playing is just don't dat don't dat don't dat digga 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 digga. It's that a really simple pattern, but of course some drummers couldn't help themselves, could they? And brought the full
drummers
15, and brought the full 15 shell kit, and the put upon girlfriend came along as well, who sat there on the carpet next to their fella, just looking up and going, "Can we go home yet?" You know, sort of thing. It was quite a day, that, I have to say, Chris.
It was.
Yeah, I became a record holder. I've still got the certificate somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah, and I even jumped on a kit when the actual record thing took place. I even jumped on a kit. I remember with my daughter at the time, who was tiny, and she sat on my lap, and I played a very bad beat along with it. Yeah, it was a really nice thing to be part of, though.
Yeah.
I want to start by saying I did a video. I've been doing these videos, and some of them have been about some of my guitars, my older guitars. And there was one guitar in particular that I have, which is a 1981 Gibson Les Paul Custom in Tobacco Burst. And I bought that guitar in 98 or 99 from a shop in Birmingham called Musical Exchanges. Now, you know this shop incredibly well, or did know this shop incredibly well, because you worked there, although we didn't meet I'm sure we didn't meet while you were working there.
No, I'd left by that time, yeah.
So I want to start before Exchanges, but I want to know your path, and when you first started playing. Was it drums or was it another instrument? And like the early years from when you started up to Exchanges.
Okay, well, so I was born in 68, and by the time I was like 8 or 9, my dad wanted me to learn piano, because my dear old late dad was an incredible piano player. He could play the sort of Gershwin stuff. He was kind of a lounge piano player. He could also do the Les Dawson stuff, the deliberately playing it badly stuff. I mean, my dad, wow, he was a brilliant piano player, and he wanted me to play. I've got 2 older brothers. I'll get to them in a minute. Phil's 5 years older than me. Rob's 7 years older. So I started on piano lessons when I was about 8 or 9, maybe. And I was showing a degree of aptitude for it. You know, what I quickly discovered was I had perfect pitch. I learned that very early on, that I had that ability to pick things out. Get to the age of about 10 or 11, and my brother Phil, the one that's 5 years older, has just started in a band that rehearses at a church hall just down the road. I go there to watch him and be the annoying little brother, and I watch them on. And the only one who's having any fun is the drummer. The only one that's got a smile on his face is the drummer. So I say to my mum when I get back, Mum, I want to play drums. And thankfully, she didn't dismiss it out of hand. She bought me a practice pad, from what would the shop have been? Woodruff's in Birmingham, probably should have got it from.
Okay.
And a pair of sticks, and I started with that. Kept the piano lessons up for a few years. Got to grade 5 standard by the time I was in my teens.
Okay.
But the drums just kept at me, kept eating away at me. I had ice cream tubs instead of tom-toms on my bed. I had a lino floor in my bedroom, so that made a good bass drum sound. That was my kit,
right,
for a few years. And then by the time I was 14, I got my first drum set, which was a knackered old Premier International kit that belonged to a friend of my cousin. My dad got it for 50 quid or something, but wow, what Christmas present that was. I can't tell you. It was rusted to goodness knows what, but it was a proper drum kit. So drums took over from about late 82 onwards for me. The piano sort of fell by the wayside, and I joined my first band about 3 years later with a school friend and a guy who's still my best mate, guitarist friend called Keith. To this day, still my best mate. And we started, writing songs as well. We were ambitious. We thought we weren't just going to be a covers band. We were going to write our own stuff. And that's how that developed. I left school. I went to sixth form college, got a couple of A-levels, and my first job after I left college, I didn't go to uni. I worked in a bank for a year and hated it. But then I got into music retail. You mentioned exchanges. I got there in the end, but I worked at a smaller music shop just outside Solihull called Express Music before that for 2 or 3 years. And then I got a job at musical exchanges and working in their guitar department, because during the time I'd worked at Express Music, ostensibly to sell their pianos, I was picking up guitar and learning how to play guitar.
Right.
To an extent where my guitar product knowledge and my guitar ability was pretty good. So they hired me at Exchanges in 1992 as a guitar salesman, and I worked there for 5 years.
How ironic.
Yeah, I know. And so the drums were always the first instrument for me as the years went through. But, the piano was always kept, in the sort of in the background, and the guitar grew more and more prominent as an instrument, because I was selling them every day, and I was, and just picking up, watching the other guys in the shop, watching their techniques, and learning how to be the best guitar player I could be.
Of course. So when you were growing up on the drums and you were learning, who were your inspirations, and who are still now your inspirations?
Well, luckily, because my 2 older brothers had a record collection that I could sort of siphon ideas off, my first heroes were people like Brian Downey from Thin Lizzy, Ian Pace from Deep Purple, Cozy Powell, those 3 guys.
Yeah,
particularly.
The classic British rock guys.
Yeah, exactly. Bill Collins as well from his the early Genesis work, and Peter Criss from Kiss as well. As a big Kiss fan, the early Peter Criss, his playing degenerated as the 70s went on. But if you listen to an album like Alive, the first live album from 75, his playing's much more free, much more jazzy, and I really like that. It was a different sort of, he didn't know what he was going to do next sort of thing. I quite like that about his style. But Cozy Powell was all about the double bass drum. Brian Downey was all about the beautiful control of the hi-hat. Ian Pace was all about the rudiments.
Yeah.
They all had little skills. So I learned loads off all those guys.
But I think you were growing up in that era, though, with, the drummers that you've just mentioned, some of the best drummers ever, especially to have ever come out of the UK. But you were lucky enough to grow up in the era of them, weren't you?
Absolutely. And it's funny, it took me a few years after that to get into Bonham and Neil Peart and discover those guys.
Yeah.
My brother went away to university and came back listening to jazz fusion. people like Larry Carlton and Lee Rickner and Alan Holdsworth. And I tried to get that, but it just didn't register with me.
Sure.
Enough to take a real deep interest in it. Although some of the stuff he used to play me, from a drumming perspective, left me bamboozled. He played me a Weather Report song once. It was like musical appreciation with my brother. He'd sit me down and say, "You're listening to this now." And he put on a Weather Report album. Omar Hakim was with Weather Report by this time. And there's a song called D-Flat Waltz on an album called Domino Theory. Mm-hmm. And it's just a wonderful, lovely little rhythm like that. And he's playing all these incredible fills around it. And of course, there's Wayne Shorter going berserk on the sax and Xanadu doing everything stupid on his keyboard. But songs like that did grab me. But as a genre, it didn't grab me anything like the way that the rock stuff I listened to did.
Of course. So you were brought up on good stuff, man. And like you say, ironically ended up being seeing the light and learning a proper instrument like guitar. And so tell me about the Exchanges days, because I mean, again, I mentioned in this video that I did when I got it, it was just such a cool place with the downstairs bit, and they had the vintage and rare bit, which is where I found this guitar that I own now, that I found there back in the 90s. But tell me some of the highlights, and in particular, can you share with us the Eddie Van Halen story? Would be amazing if you can.
Oh yeah. So when I came to Exchanges, it was a very different looking shop to the one that you shopped in some years later, with that downstairs emporium. That whole area that you shopped in used to belong to a lighting and PA company that owned it for a few years during the 80s and early 90s. And in the end, they sold up to Exchanges and moved out. So originally, where the acoustics were in the time you went, that was the guitar department. And it was it was incredible. It was like a shanty town of amplifiers, because Musical Exchanges, the whole premise was, it was based on people part exchanging old amps and guitars and pedals for new stuff. And you would walk into that guitar department with its wonderful musty smell. And there were lots of secondhand gear, lots of, like, there were about 10 PV Renowns, I seem to remember. Like, you know, everyone was getting rid of PV Renowns around the time I started there, which was 92. And there was also that slight crossover era, Chris, where guitarists were starting to get rid of their JCM 800 and 900 heads, right? And the whole era of the JMP1 preamp and the Quadraverb, and, you know, everybody,
the early digital stuff.
Yeah, everyone, or Rocktron Intellifex if you were a little bit more flush, right? So everyone wanted, all the guitarists seemed to want to upgrade, no matter how good that, you know. And of course, they repented at leisure when they realized, in retrospect, just how good that JCM 800 sounded compared to, you know, what they ended up getting. But that was the era I remember. And also, one of the first things I remember, I walked into that guitar department the first day, and there were 2 Heritage Les Pauls on sale, secondhand Heritage Les Pauls, 1980 would that be? Kind of Gary Moore style-y Les Pauls. And they were up on a shelf that you couldn't reach if you were just a mug punter. You would have to ask to get them down. And they were both selling, I can remember it because the labels were on there. You don't get things like that. £1,250.
Wow.
You could they're probably worth 10 times that.
Yeah.
Now. And I'm pretty sure they sold within 2 or 3 months of me starting there. That guitar department that you shopped in, the one downstairs, that didn't happen for a couple of years. That was probably about 1994, 95 that the expansion happened. The Eddie Van Halen story is in the old guitar department. So 93, Van Halen are on tour. Balance tour, I think.
I guess it would have been, yeah.
Somebody might know better. Anyway, they played the NEC, and some of the guys, I didn't go, I wasn't able to go, but some of the guys had gone to see it in the shop. And the next day, me and Gary Morris, who was my buddy, the guitar salesman, we were the 2 main guitar salesmen. We're just in the guitar department. And little Gary Chapman, the boss, comes in and says, lads, have we got an EVH? model. And I pointed, yeah, we got like a pink quilted top one there. Great. Give it to Johnny, the guitar tech. Tell him I need a set of 9 to 46s or something on there now, and it's got to be detuned half a step, and it's got to be done in the next 45 minutes. Yeah, okay. What's it for, Gaz? Can't tell you. All right. So I grabbed this. It was the one Van Halen model we had. Took it to John downstairs. Told him what was required. He got on with it. About 40 minutes later, the door to the main entrance opens. In comes Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath with Eddie Van Halen in tow. So what had happened was, it was a day off on the Van Halen tour, and all their gear had gone up to Sheffield because I think they had a gig the night after. This was a day off, but the day after they were playing at the Sheffield City Hall, or maybe the arena if it was ready by then. And Eddie, on his day off, wanted to go and have a jam with Sabbath because he was mates with Tony. But of course, all his guitars had disappeared off up north. So he didn't have, of course, Tony can't lend him a guitar because he's like you, he's a lefty. And of course, he has 7-gauge strings or whatever he uses. So there's nothing he could lend to Eddie that he could have used. So Tony goes, oh, I'll ring Exchanges. They might have one of your guitars in. So as luck would have it, we did. Eddie came in wearing kind of a peach kind of sweater, jogging bottoms, looking very down at heel. Tony, of course, all dressed in black because he's Tony. And Eddie just he didn't plug it in because the guitar was brought to him. He just had a little fiddle with it. Yeah, that's fine. And brought it up to, and we signed a hire form, so he could and Gary Morris said to him at one point, Ed, sorry, have you got any ID? And of course, Eddie's, the sarcasm's completely lost on Ed. And he goes, no, I'm sorry. I don't have it. And another facet to this story was my long-time friend, Phil Docker, who was at that time was actually working on constructing the downstairs or knocking walls through so that this new guitar department could be built. He was meant to be in, but he was off sick. And he'd been to the Van Halen show the night before, and he's just the most enormous Van Halen fan. So Gary Morris, being the rotten sod that he is, we're at the counter filling out this hire form, and Gaz just turns to me and says, what's Phil's number? I said, you can't do that, Gaz. What's his number? You can't. All right, it's 248. So Gaz rings up, and the conversation went something like this. Oh, Phil, you'll never guess who's in here. No, he is. I'm telling you, he is. He's here. No, he's coming to hire a guitar. No, look, Ian, he's here, isn't he? Yeah, he's definitely here, Phil. Yeah, he's here. No, look, I wouldn't wind you up about something like this. And then Gary just gets the phone, throws it to us. Speak to him, will you? Just hands the phone to Eddie. Eddie picks up the phone and goes, hi, Eddie Van Halen here. You could hear Phil's bowels evacuating at the other end of the telephone line as he realised he was speaking to his hero. And of course, within seconds, he's off. And Phil refused to believe that it actually happened. It was just me putting on an American accent until he saw the photo of me and Tony and Gary with Eddie Van Halen.
It's a photo that you shared recently, I think, on Twitter, and I'd seen it before several times, but I'd forgotten about it. And I remember you and I think perhaps Gaz told me both Gazes, I think, told me the story over the years as well. But it's such a brilliant story. Oh my God. And also I think, what does that say for the shop as well at the time, for Tony Iommi to, who obviously is being the lefty guitar channel, the godfather of being lefty along with Jimi Hendrix and whatever. But he would happily come along to call the shop up and see what you've got in for his mate Eddie Van Halen to use so they can go and have a jam. I mean, take the fame out of it. That's just a couple of mates wanting to go and have a jam together on a Tuesday afternoon or whatever,
Would you not have loved to have been a fly on the wall at that little rehearsal, that little get together? Yeah, it was one of the Sabbaths. I mean, I'm trying to think who was in Sabbath at that time.
Yeah, wouldn't have been Ozzy, would it?
Dave Spitz might have been on bass. It might have been a friend of mine, Pano Molaris, on drums at the time, I think. I'm not sure that Eric Singer was playing. No, because Eric was in Kiss by that time. But anyway, Jeff Nichols would have been on keyboards and whatnot. And probably Tony Martin singing.
Yeah, maybe.
So anyway, yeah, would you not have loved to have seen... I mean, Tony might even have a recording of that. You just don't know.
No, that's right.
On something that was captured that day. But yeah, the cachet of working in exchanges meant that you did see a lot of people coming into the shop who would just wanted to come in and hang out for a bit.
Yeah, of
course.
They
didn't be hassled. They just wanted to come in and, you know, have a natter and a cup of coffee and see what was what.
Yeah.
Steve Craddock from Ocean Colour Scene used to come in an awful lot. And I remember him showing me and Gaz, he said, I've got this riff idea. I don't know what you think. And he plays dun 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 dun. What became the Riverboat song?
Yeah.
And me and Gas going, yeah, that sounds wicked. Yeah, you should make something out of that. So it's funny how you meet these.
It's crazy. I remember it might have even been that same night I got the Les Paul. If not, it was another Marshall clinic around that time that I did down there. And Gaz Morris saying to me, oh yeah, I got me mate Glenn Tipton coming along tonight from Judas Priest. And I was like, and I didn't really know him I didn't really know Gaz that well at the time. I was like, all right, thinking, what? And lo and behold, Glenn Tipton just turned up and there he is and had a lovely chat with him and he was just part of the audience. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, so the stars would pop in, you know, and whatnot. And I've got a guitar here. Gary Morris, bless him, he used to look after me because he knew my Kiss leanings, right?
Sure.
So one day, it's a Saturday. We'd moved downstairs by this point, so it's the guitar department, you know. And Saturdays in there were mental. It was just a sea of people, either milling around or wanting to be served or actually buying things. It was not unusual to have 2 or 3 customers on the go at once on a Saturday. And you never had time to stop and have your lunch. You were eating on the go or drinking on the go or whatever. And at one point on a Saturday, it's bedlam behind the counter. Everybody's trying to get to the till to ring stuff in. And Gaz Morris just looks at me and says, go and have a look in the deposit room. So I haven't got time, Gaz. I've got this. Go and look in the deposit room. So I go and look in the deposit room and he's left this in there. He's just part exchanged this early 80s Ibanez Iceman with a sunburst finish. And he knew that I would want it. He knew I'd be given my love for the Paul Stanley PS10s from a few years before. So that ended up costing me about 120 quid.
Wow.
And as you can see, I've still got it. Even better, not long, I'd left the shop for about a year and I'm in radio by this time. I'm doing the travel reports for BRMB radio. My job I used to get up at like 4:30 in the morning. I'll be finished by 10. And one day Gaz rings me. And as usual, with classic Gaz Morris, it's straight to the point. Get in the shop now. So what? So, just get in the shop now. So, what, are you doing anything? So, well, funnily enough, I'm not. Get in here now then. So I drove the 20 minutes into exchanges. And he had, again, put something aside for me, which was this, which is a Gibson H. Freely.
It is. The very one. Oh, I love that. I've always loved that headstock. It's so good.
And some guy had bought it brand new and was terrified of playing it, absolutely terrified of playing it. And he just sold it for cash.
Really?
And Gaz had sold it, you know, got a decent price for it and said, I know who wants this, Ian. Yeah. So he rang me straight away. And you know, that was a silly price I paid for that. It's certainly it's the prized asset in my collection, I think I would say.
Yeah.
But that's what happened at exchanges. Things just, the oddest things used to come in on part exchange, and there were sort of, you know, as I said, when I first arrived, there were loads of PV Renowns or Roland jazz choruses that everybody was getting rid of to get something else, and then it moved on to, you know, another amp or another preamp or another effects pedal that everybody wanted.
Yeah.
Fascinating times.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
It was, and you know, just from an outsider looking in, just having these glimpses every now and then coming to the store, it was, you know, I could see the rapport you guys had, and I've kept in touch with a lot of you guys over the years, and everyone's gone on to do various other things, which sort of leads us on. Really, you mentioned that after you left Exchanges, you got into broadcasting. How did that happen, and what were the early gigs, the broadcasting things that you'd started doing?
Well, I got offered. I was in 1997. I was offered a job to go and work for Laney because they just won the contract to distribute Ibanez in the UK.
So that would have been Headstock.
Yeah, Headstock. That's right. Yeah. That was the launch of that company.
Right.
And I was approached to be the Headstock guy and deal with the Japanese and the Korean deliveries of the Ibanezes, get them checked, for QC, and send them out to the dealers. So I ended up working in Cradley Heath at the Laney factory for about a year, but I didn't really enjoy it that much. It was a fairly lonely job. You didn't really have much company. And just before I left Exchanges, what had happened was Keith, who I mentioned earlier, my best mate who I formed my first band with, he wrote a letter to the head of sport at BRMB Radio in Birmingham saying, my mate Ian does brilliant impressions of football managers like Trevor Francis and Graham Taylor down the pub. You should get him on the radio. Now, I don't know how many letters people like Tom Ross as a head of sport get about, or want to be on the radio. But something in this letter obviously piqued his interest. So to cut a long story short, he rang me whilst I was still working at Exchanges to ask if I would record a comedy sketch to go on his Saturday afternoon preview show before a live game.
Wow.
It wasn't getting paid for it or anything,
Sure.
It was just for
opportunity,
just for giggles.
Yeah.
And that developed over the course of the time that I left Exchanges and went to Laney. And then early 98, he rings me up in the office one morning, says, this Tom Ross, says, Ian, are you, what are you doing at the minute? It's like another Gareth Morris phone call. What are you doing? So, well, I'm just setting some stuff. Can you come in the office now? It's another one of these calls. I said, yeah, please come in now. I need to see you. But he puts the phone down. And I think, I know what this is. This is like, he wants to give me the pill. He wants to say he doesn't want to use me anymore, but thanks very much. So I make up this cock and bull story about needing to go to the jewellery quarter in Birmingham to pick up some guitar parts, drove the works van into the BRMB car park, which is right at the top of the Aston Expressway by the old HP Source factory, where ATV used to have their buildings way back. They used to make Crossroads. And I meet up with Tom, and he takes me across the programming floor, knocks on the door, this door I've not been in before, and it's the program controller of the station, Paul Jackson, the son of Richard Park, the famous radio impresario who was the Fame Academy judge on the BBC.
Oh, yeah.
His son, Paul Jackson, was the program controller. And I'd sat down in his office, and within 5 minutes, he's offered me a job going up in the plane that flies around Birmingham every morning in the week, doing the travel updates, the Flying Eye, as it was called.
Yeah.
And he said, do you want the job? And I had to say yes or no then. And I said yes. And that was it. The next week I was up in a plane. I gave Laney the pill. And
I mean, just to clarify to anyone watching and listening, you didn't have to do any impressions of football managers in the plane. This was just you doing your own voice, right?
It's me. Although the whole reason why he employed me was he wanted to encourage me to have some fun with it.
Oh, really?
Because the host of the breakfast show on BRMB, Les Ross, who an astounding talent as a broadcaster, not known nationally, but if you mention Les Ross to anybody around the Midlands, they go, oh yeah, round the world phone calls, the breakfast show. This guy could talk for England about anything.
Right.
Brilliant at it as well. So yeah, eventually like Des Lynam would be doing the travel updates into Les's show or Billy Connolly or something like that. I don't know. So yeah, that was encouraged.
Oh, wow.
Little baby steps from there. You started getting offered shifts on the AM frequency station, the sister station. And then, basically within 2 years of starting in the plane, I was the drive time presenter on BRMB with a show called The Barmy Brummies. Honestly, Chris, it was just a whirlwind, an absolute whirlwind. And little stages of, that's odd. But but it all built up and built up. And in amongst all that, I'm also starting as a football reporter because Tom decided he needed somebody to report on football matches for him, and he decided I was the guy. So in about 98, 99, that season, I started doing match reports, which turned into doing full commentaries for him. So suddenly, 2 years before, I'm a guitar salesman. 2 years on from that, I'm commentating on Birmingham City or West Bromwich Albion and doing, shifts and going up in a plane doing the travel bulletin.
Absolutely.
It was a bit of a handbrake turn career-wise.
Of course, but quite a pivotal moment when you took the works van and nipped off quickly to go and have that chat, because had you not done that, it's one of those things, isn't it? The whole sliding doors moment where you think
somebody else would have been offered that job instead of me.
Yeah.
Somebody else would have been sat down and said, right, you want the flying eye? So yeah. I was probably on a list. Don't know whether I was on the top of that list, but I was probably on a list of people that they had in mind for that role.
Before that, though, your friend sending in stuff to the station saying, "Oh, you need to check my mate out," and just the luck of the draw of that happening like that.
He never lets me forget it either.
No, I bet. Every time you go out to dinner,
every single time, he's quick. He's quick with the reminders. But as I say, he's still my best friend to this day. So some things do endure.
Absolutely. So from there on, you kind of had the way I see it, you kind of had a bit of a parallel thing going on. No matter, regardless of the broadcast and stuff, you still had the music. Was this about the time of the Dress to Kill stuff started happening?
Well, I'd done original bands, in my teens and my 20s, whilst I was, at exchanges, and a little bit before that, there was a band I was in called Shotgun Wedding, who were a Birmingham-based sort of an Aerosmithy type band that didn't make it. And then in 94, I joined a Welsh band who were just changing their name from City Kids to Sons of God. They were amazing. They were brilliant. But again, they didn't make any particular headway. Then I started doing, in the late 90s, around the time when the BRMB thing came along, I'd sort of had a moment of clarity that, right, I'm not going to make it. I did have the delusions of grandeur about I'm going to be a rock star when I was 15, 16. I had that. And, by the time you get to the age of 29, 30, when this BRMB thing came along, then I'd had the moment of clarity and said, okay, you just need to have some fun now.
Sure.
Rather than, entertain notions of being a successful professional musician. So I started helping out tribute bands. I started with, there was a Bon Jovi tribute band in Birmingham called New Jersey that I played with for some time. And then the Dress to Kill thing came along in 2005, which was, for those that don't know, people, Dress to Kill are the longest running Kiss tribute band in the world. They started in 1990. And they needed a drummer in 2005. I'd started another Kiss tribute band a couple of years before that, which had gone okay. But when Dress to Kill come calling,
of course,
turned them down. So I joined them in 2005 and ended up playing not just all around the UK, but around Europe. Places like Norway and Spain and things like that. With the makeup. Yeah.
I remember being at one of the guitar shows. Obviously, it must have been Music Live or something like that at the NEC. And I'm sure one of the guys, the guy who ever played Paul Stanley in Dress to Kill, he was, I'm sure, just stood around one of the companies or shops that got him in just to stand there and look like Paul Stanley. But I swear to God, now I've never met Paul Stanley, unfortunately, but because he had the makeup and he was, oh my God, it was like his twin. It was uncanny how much he looked and acted like him. It was incredible. He didn't even have a guitar and he wasn't even singing. No,
that was Ash. And Ash has been the Paul Stanley in Dress to Kill since day one.
Incredible.
He totally embodies that whole, he'd be on stage and he has all the Paul Stanley stage patter.
Yeah, right.
Completely sorted. So I can quite imagine him being Paul Stanley without a guitar in his hand, just tossing around on his heels, helping stuff for a company. One of the biggest gigs we ever did was at the NEC, actually. There was a 2010, I think it was. They did a music live at the NEC, and one of the halls was sectioned off so that they could recreate the 1988 Donington Monsters of Rock lineup with
with tribute bands.
Maiden, Kiss, Dave Lee Roth, Megadeth, Guns N' Roses.
Right.
They even got a Halloween tribute in. So we ended up doing, we were second on the bill to High on Maiden.
Amazing.
And that was just a brilliant, I played the NEC.
Yeah, of course.
That was quite a kick, that.
I mean, the whole thing for you, though, joining that band must have been, is the ultimate gig, really, for you as a drummer, as a huge Kiss fan.
Yes.
And also at that point, you know, because you'd been doing the broadcasting thing for so long, you could, like you say, just go and have a load of fun with it, with your playing.
Yes, absolutely. I knew the parts. As I said, Peter Criss had been, you know, a good influence on me. And then, of course, Eric Carr, who played drums for Kiss in the 80s, because what Dress to Kill did was they, you know, the set list spanned the whole gamut, every album that Kiss ever did. You know, we do 23 song sets. You know, they were pretty punishing shows. Because, of course, you got 2 hours to get into makeup and costume.
Yeah, right.
One sound checks. We didn't have a massive road crew with us. There was just the 4 of us and one guy who would set up the pyros and help one of us if we had an emergency during the show. But
sure.
Yeah, it was hard bloody work.
I bet.
You'd have to do 2 nights on a weekend, a Friday and a Saturday. The Friday to recoup costs, and the Saturday was how you made a little bit of profit.
Sure.
We'd have a Mercedes splitter van. We'd all cram into that with all the gear. Somehow we got all the gear in. Find a, you know, travel tavern, Partridge style, to stay in on the Friday night. Find a carvery. We didn't have breakfast on Saturday morning because we were up so late. We'd find the nearest Toby Carvery or whatever it was, and we'd just load in the carbs on an early Saturday afternoon, halfway between there and whatever gig we had that night. And that Toby Carvery kept us going all day, basically, so we didn't need any food when we got to the next gig. But I wouldn't change it for the world. Those were brilliant, brilliant times.
Of course.
And yeah, to play the most memorable night we were asked to go and play 2 nights in Spain in 2009, and the one night was in a Spanish holiday resort, Lloret de Mar, which is a coastal resort not too far from Barcelona. And it's a place, a thing called the Clone Festival. They have one tribute band a year come and play, and they asked us this one year. And the stage was actually built into the seafront, at the one end of the seafront. So stretching out, you could see the seafront. You could,
right.
And we sound check. We go into the porter cabin down underneath. We get changed. We come back up. I've never seen so many people in my entire life.
Really?
And they loved it. And you know, especially when we played "I Was Made for Loving You," which of course is the European Kiss hit.
Yeah,
everyone jumping up and down.
Right.
Astonishing, absolutely astonishing. You actually felt like a member of Kiss that night, even though I'm nowhere near. But something like
that. You know, those bands make great livings. You know, especially the bands that don't tour as the original lineups. You know, the tribute band versions of those always do so well, man. I want to move on, kind of, because on the other side of the fence, you were still broadcasting, and by now you were doing the TalkSport thing.
Yes.
So how did you the TalkSport thing come about?
Well, I left BRMB as a presenter in 2002, but I stayed on as a football commentator for the next 2 years. I'd like to have stayed as a presenter, but circumstances dictated otherwise. And I did football commentary for a couple of years, did a bit of shopping telly, funnily enough, during that time for a place in Redditch, not too far from where I was living. But then in 2004, an old radio buddy who I had BRMB connections with said, TalkSport are looking for a Midlands reporter. You should get yourself in there. So thanks to Nigel, I submitted a show reel to their head of sport, and he said, yeah, come in. So from the 2004 season, I started I was just a reporter, I wasn't a commentator. So you go to matches on a Saturday and you just do updates.
Yeah.
But it was national radio. So even though it was a different role to what I'd done before, you could see the potential in where it might lead. And things did, develop to the extent that by 2006, I was doing commentaries on games at the World Cup that summer in Germany. And it just grew. Again, it just grew and grew and grew little stages. So by 2010, I went out to South Africa to cover the entire World Cup out there. Saw the most amazing sights,
Wow.
Cape Town and Pretoria and Johannesburg and Port Elizabeth. So TalkSport, again, kind of grew organically the same way that BRMB had done for me. I'm still there now. As I said, 17 years, man and boy. My role has varied and changed over the years, but I'm back doing football commentaries now, which is my stock in trade, whether it be a Premier League game or a Championship game. But yeah, I still talk about 22 men running about after a bag of wind on a pitch.
But it's another thing that you're equally as passionate about, surely, than you are playing drums and Kiss and commentating on football, right?
Well, Birmingham City is a hereditary disease in my family that's been passed down from generation to generation. So I'm a third generation Blue Nose, I guess you could call me, because of my granddad and my dad.
Okay.
Before me and their love for the club. So that just gets ingrained into you.
Yeah, of course.
Question as to what degree of passion you end up having. My two older brothers they're into. Well, Rob, my eldest brother, he's into it. My middle brother Phil, not pretty ambivalent. He'll look out for the results, but he's not really that interested. Me, I fell for it hook, line, and sinker, and would go with my dad whenever I could. And when he stopped going after one relegation too many, when my dad said, no more, I'm not going, I can't take the heartbreak anymore, then I stupidly picked up the slack and kept going on my own, and then went with friends and things like that. So, becoming a football commentator wasn't too much of a stretch. And it was something that I wondered whether I could do.
Sure.
And, I've lasted this long.
Well, I was going to say, not only that though, but in more recent times in general, you've still upheld the music side of it as well. Like I was saying, you lead this quite clever parallel life in trying to keep an equal balance of both.
It's not that clever. Oh.
But you've done a couple of your own solo albums. You tour with a theatre band that do a load of like rock covers called Leather and Lace. Yes. So you're still keeping your hand in it massively, really.
Yeah, well, the solo album thing was an itch I felt I had to scratch in the wake of the passing of Steve Harris, the Shy guitar player, who I got as a customer at exchanges and whatnot. Such a talented player, lovely, fluid, melodic rock player, Steve Harris was.
Yeah.
And he passed away in 2011. And it was at his funeral when I was just chatting to the producer of the last Shy album that he put together, knowing he was poorly. And Alex had said to me, well, he just said, I could get, anything could happen tomorrow. I want to get this stuff out there. And I just had this light bulb. I've got all these songs I've never recorded properly. Let's do it. So I recorded what turned out to be Prove You Wrong, which came out in, let me get this right, 2013. Lee Small, the singer from Phenomena and Shy, incredible vocalist. He sang on most of that for me because I didn't feel particularly confident as a vocalist. By the time I was recording another one, because what had happened was that the first album had lit the fire under me as a songwriter. Then second time around came along a couple of years later. And I've got a third solo album is in the works at the moment. I don't know when it will be finished, but it's about halfway through. yeah, the leather and lace thing is a great thing. It's a 7-piece theatre rock band that plays, you know, classic rock anthems and power ballads is how we bill it. So you can be playing Toto, Foreigner, Journey, REO Speedwagon, Def Leppard, Aerosmith, Bon Jovi, all that sort of stuff.
Great.
Theatre setting, 7-piece band, a male and female lead singer, 2 guitars, bass, keyboards, and me on the drums at the back. And I love it. It's just, I've got into things like in-ear monitors in the last couple of years, and my hearing isn't the greatest. It's suffered a lot as a drummer over the years. And in-ear monitors and the old the drum throne thing, you know, the
butt kicker thing.
Butt kicker. Yeah. Oh my God. Those two things have completely saved my drumming bacon.
Yeah, I bet.
So that you'd not have a giant, you know,
subwoofer behind you. Yeah.
Blasting it. You've got a nice pair of in-ears, and you've got the butt kicker for all the, you know, the low basically goes through your backside.
Yeah.
And it relaxes your playing. I think that's the thing I've discovered about it. It actually relaxes my playing tempo-wise. So the 2 guitarists in front of me aren't panicking about, well, I've got this cold as ice solo coming up in a minute. He's going about 5 BPM too fast because he's running away with it.
Yeah,
I don't do that.
No, it's funny with the in-ear monitor thing because I've been using them for probably the last 10 years or so, and especially when you're playing acoustic, because the biggest mistake a guitarist can ever make when they're playing acoustic live is if they can't hear enough of themselves, they'll start hitting it harder. Naturally, you just want to start, and of course, all that sounds like out front is some guy, you know, really, you know, an acoustic guitar when it should be nice and gentle. When you got the in-ears in, you got a lovely little mix. It's right there, and it's right there in the middle of your head, and you can hear it beautifully. You know, so they are saving the day with a lot of people. And those butt kicker things are amazing as well.
Well, Craig Blundell turned me onto those,
right?
And Craig showed me the benefits of it, and you don't actually realise until you're actually at a gig and you try it for the first time, and it's revelatory for any drummers. I know this is a guitarist.
No, it's fine. I've had other drummers on here. It's fine.
But guitarists, tell your drummers if they haven't tried a Porter and Davis, they're not cheap. I mean, let's have it right. There, you know, it's an investment. But to me, and for the sake of the band that you're in, what it does for the how it calms a player down, it's a worthwhile investment. Because quite often, if you're waiting for a subwoofer, or maybe the mix isn't great and you're not getting a very good bass drum sound in your monitor, sometimes you're feeling for it as a player. I can only go by my experience, and maybe that affects your tempo because you're more desperate to hear something, and somehow you're playing, your dynamics don't work the same way. Yeah. Once you're relaxed and you know that you've got that thing going through your posterior, regular as clockwork, and you've got the in-ears with all the drivers you need so that everything's clear, then wow, what that does for your playing.
It's a wonderful thing. Absolutely. You've done other things more recently as well as talk sport. You've done commercials, you've done voiceovers and stuff like that. And also, you know, one of the things when I first heard you on it for the first time, I was just so pleased for you. You're on Planet Rock every now and then as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, again, that was not by design. I will freely admit, whilst I was a Planet Rock devotee and a listener, I had no desire to muscle in, as it were, on that territory. And I always get the year wrong with this. I think it might be 2015 when I got an email out of the blue through my website from Rick Blaxill, who's the head honcho at Planet Rock. He looks after a number of stations within that radio group, like Absolute and Magic and Kiss and things like that. Not the Kiss FM I'd like to present on. It's a very different.
Can you imagine?
And somebody, and I still to this day don't know who, had tipped him off. You should get Ian on Planet Rock. He loves his.
It wasn't your mate again, was it?
Don't think it was Keith again. No. I don't think he's got Rick Blaxill's ear somehow. Somebody did. So I was asked, can you go in and do a little demo, see whether you're up to it? And I said, absolutely. I'll demo stuff up for you. So the Planet Rock thing suddenly became a thing where you would cover for. Normally, I cover for Paul Anthony these days on Breakfast, and sometimes for Wyatt, and sometimes for Darren if the football work doesn't get in the way. But yeah, that's a wonderful little thing because you can just be you. You respect the music, you know.
Of course, yeah. You know exactly what you're talking about when it comes to all of that as well. Equally the same as with football, surely. And you know, it's a great station.
I've learned to get into. There's. I'll happily admit there's artists I hadn't appreciated enough before I worked at Planet Rock, who, when you actually listen to the body of work, you realise how good they are. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers is probably as good an example as any of a band and an artist I'd somehow overlooked.
Yeah.
You know, it happens, doesn't it? You know, there's bands that somehow pass you by. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just how it happens. But when you start listening to some of that stuff and, you know, you start delving deeper, you realise, my God, this guy's got a body of work that's absolutely stunning. And there's other bands as well that I could, you know, Lynyrd Skynyrd and things like that. Some of the deeper cuts you play from them, and you realise, you know, that they're a talented bunch. So basically, working at Planet Rock is kind of having my iPod.
Of course. Same with me when I have it on in the car, and it's, you know, I'm glad because there was a while ago, it was, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, it was looking quite iffy if they continue with the station because I think they were struggling with funding. But funnily enough, this is quite a funny story that I don't think I've ever mentioned before. But when Planet Rock first started, which would have been, I don't know,
21 years old now.
That's right. It is, because last year they were doing the big 20th birthday. And I very nearly put this on social media to them because one of my best friends, Tank Montana, he's a Canadian radio presenter. He was one of the first presenters on Planet Rock. And so it was all very primitive at the time. And I even remember him saying they were just trying to get all the tracks in to play out on the station. And I'm sure they didn't have like Enter Sandman by Metallica. And he borrowed my Black album so they could burn it off so they had the track on their system and stuff like that. But before Planet Rock launched, of course, it was really mainly just on their website, you know, that you could listen in at the time, because DAB hadn't really taken off massively as it is now with people with it in their cars and whatever.
Yeah.
And so they had a hold-in website before the radio station launched. And because Tank was involved, what they wanted was just some background music to play on the website for visitors when they went on there. So me and Tank on drums and Rob, who's played with me loads, it was a recording of the three of us just jamming for about 10 or 15 minutes that they had on a loop that was recorded at my mum's house. And that was what you would hear when you went to the Planet Rock website before the station launched.
That's top draw.
It's funny, isn't it? And I forget about it sometimes. And it wasn't until I think Rob reminded me about it, or Tank might remind me about it when we spoke. And I was like, oh my God, I totally forgot about that. We were the first band to play on Planet Rock.
Well, it's a real privilege to work there, and you do understand as much with Planet Rock as you do with Talk Sport about the listener base and respecting the listeners as much as you respect the music. I don't get too much abuse. There's there are people online that do want to deliberately wind you up, but I don't get anything like as much as lots of other people in broadcasting do. So I should be grateful that a lot of that kind of passes me by. But I do. Honestly, whether it's TalkSport or whether it's Planet Rock, it's never lost on me the responsibility that I have, to make the listener want to stick around. All you can do is be yourself anyway. You can't pretend to be somebody else and put on a funny mid-Atlantic accent and suddenly you're dropping the T's in your words and substituting them for D's. You do politics. You just try and be yourself, and of course, hopefully people respond to that and warm to it. So that's been a really nice little thing. And I did a podcast as well last year when lockdown first hit, which was just based on the comedy stuff I used to do on BRMB with all the silly voices and parody songs and things like that. And with the setup I've got here, which is, I'm sure, not too dissimilar to what you got there. I've got a drum kit over there, a keyboard just behind me, and guitars, as you've seen.
Sure.
That was a good fun thing last year, to make silly parody songs of Heart or Hot Chocolate or things like that, just for giggles. That was good fun.
Yeah, I bet. And I think surely you're now at the point, and I wouldn't say this because you're a friend, and I do obviously genuinely recognize your voice, but when I heard you on Planet Rock, I thought, good on. But I think you are one of those recognizable voices now as well. You know what I mean? In radio, personally, and I'm sure a lot of people would agree.
Well, I mean, I've got a fairly. I don't know whether I've got a particularly Midlands accent. It's not it's not a Brummie accent
It's not a Gaz Morris accent, no.
No, it's no. But I've got an accent that I guess you could say is Midlands. I don't know whether that makes it distinctive. I go for a bath. I mow the grass. I don't.
Why would you do that? You could go for a bath and mow the grass.
See that there's the dichotomy. That's but that's just the way that Brummies talk. It's always been having a laugh.
Exactly. Yeah.
The bath. So, well, thank you. Well, if I do sound distinctive, then that's great. And as long as I still sound like me, I would hate to think that I went on air and sounded like somebody that wasn't me. Sounded like an exaggerated version of myself.
Yeah.
That wouldn't fit very comfortably with me. I'd rather just go on air and be me, take it or leave it, warts and all.
Well said. I think we'll wrap it up there. Ian Danter, thank you very much, mate.
I salute you, Chris.
I salute you too. Cheers, mate.
Top man.